new episodes of Dick Dixon in the 21st Century.
It's a fuzzy, distorted blur, like watching BBC Two on the Isle of Wight.
I can barely make out anything through the interference, just vague shapes moving up and down.
Lieutenant Fox, can you use the computer to improve the picture quality?
Of course, Admiral. It hadn't occurred to me to do that.
That's why they made me Admiral. I think outside the box.
Applying image enhancement. Warning. The distress signal you are about to see contains images of a graphic nature that some viewers may find disturbing.
Oh dear. I hope this isn't another one of those situations where they've started eating each other.
Dick Dixon and the Love Bug is available for purchase now from www.averagerock.com. Welcome to Happy Times and Places, in which I, Toby Hadoke, have to try to guess my special guests' favourite things about the Doctor Who story that they have chosen. So I shall be commentating along, but accentuating the positive as I go.
Hello Toby, and anyone who's watching or listening to this. My name's Michael Dennis. I'm a writer and stage manager. Thank you for inviting me in. The story I've chosen for you to watch is the Macra Terror. I've discovered I've got quite a lot to say about this, so I'm going to say no more now and hand straight back to you.
Well, hello. Thanks to Michael, a nobly concise intro there. I'm excited to hear what he has to say about the Macra Terror. Michael is one of those friends from Whodom who I've never actually met. He's met my other half, who doesn't know anything about Doctor Who. I mean, she's probably never even heard of the Macra Terror, but she does know Michael. They've worked together before I even existed in her life. When he stage managed the show, she was in. So it's a small old world. But Michael has helped me out with a couple of contacts before in the past, and we've exchanged messages and stuff. And he's been very encouraging of these podcasts. So thanks, Michael. It's really appreciated, because it can be a lonely old business. Well, you fling it out there and you just don't know. And he's chosen the Macra Terror, which is a very interesting story for all sorts of reasons, but I'm not going to waste those reasons during the preamble, because this is a telesnap reconstruction. We're not doing the animation. We might talk about that as well. So I'm going to do the one that is closest to my experience of what of the televised episodes. I think the animations are great, but I think for these purposes they would be a distraction, because I'm trying to assess the story as broadcast. I don't know why that's a rule, but it's my rule. So I'm going to go to, is it episode selection? I'm on the fancy new Blu-ray, which I'm on somewhere. I think. Oh yeah, I'm on the commentary. No, so that's the. This might be the longest. This introduction is going to be longer than Michael's, because I've got to actually find. So do they count as a special feature then? Their special feature? I've definitely got the right disc, because I checked earlier. Episode reconstructions, and they're split over 2 episodes, over 2 discs. Episode 1 play with narration, episode 1 play without narration. Now, why didn't they put 4 episodes on one disc with narration and 4 episodes on one disc without narration? Oh, I suppose because it's probably just a different layer of sound, isn't it? There'll be a reason. Although actually I can see there's a space at either side of the dash between episode 1, episode 2, and then the play with, play without, except on episode 1 where there's no space after the dash, which would have played, which is the sort of thing I know I make mistakes like that on things all the time, and you only notice when you actually finally put it to print, you go, oh no, it's not symmetrical, it's not right. Your brain may not be banjaxed by that, but mine is, which is why I've mentioned something probably really unimportant. Doctor Who fan with brain that requires things to be a certain way, who then goes on in far too great length about why it isn't. Who has ever encountered such a phenomenon? Right, so I'm going to play without narration, I think, for the pure, as close to the broadcast episode as possible, experience of episode 1 of the Macra Terror. And I am going to go in 3, 2, 1. So, that's an extraordinary thing in and of itself, that we have, the people who make these discs. So, well, there's some people who like the reconstructions to have narration, and some who don't. So let's cater for both. And there are some who like covers which fit with the design that we used to do, and some don't. So let's do reversible sleeves. We are hugely indulged, but I think it's because they know we would set fire to buildings. But we are hugely indulged. We don't know how lucky you are. Now, here's one of the first really interesting things about the Macra Terror, is that this series of telesnaps with the titles on. And that's the first use of the Doctor Who title sequence with the Doctor's face as well. But we'll talk about that. Will we? Maybe. But these close-ups of Terence Lodger's, Medoc's eyes, they're an addition by the director, John Davis. They weren't in the script. And there's all sorts of bits and bobs like that. The scripts that we have, and I haven't looked at them especially for this, but I have looked at them at various points, and I prepared for the DVD, and I also have talked to Johnny Morris about various little anomalies that crop up that we simply don't have a definitive answer to, because the scripts have got crossings out, and they're not scripts that necessarily reflect what we can hear in the soundtrack. So there's a certain bit of jigsaw making with Macra Terror, and I love that. I love the fact that, I hate the fact the episodes are missing, but I love the fact that if they are, there are things that we need to ponder and guess and think about. And in fact, one head scratcher was solved relatively recently, and I will get to that when we get to episode 4. But my first introduction to the Macra Terror was in the Radio Times 20th anniversary special, and there's that brilliant picture of Graham Lehman as the controller, although it's a picture that lies, and we'll get to that as well, with the crab, Claw, coming to pull him off, quiet at the back, but coming to grab it. And it's a brilliant shot. It's a great published shot. Looks like the shot of a 1950s horror movie that would have that just seemed so much bigger and bolder than anything that you saw on telly. I know they all look a bit sort of hokey now, but as a kid looking at that, going, Doctor Who used to do that sort of thing. People being that's clever in the reconstruction. They're using the footage of Krelper and the gunrunner in Chaos of Androzani chasing after Medoc, because it's the location is similar. It's the old quarry, and just stuck the heads of the Macra Terror guards on. That's very clever, because, although we like to think the telesnaps give us an idea of the episode, how many thousands of frames are in an episode, and we've got, 48 per one. So, there's a lot of filling out that has to be done. So well done. There's me not talking about the episode, talking about the reconstruction. I'll try not to do that. But this is another area where there's lots of, we've just got lots of sound, and we have to guess what went on. So should any of these episodes turn up, and there were rumours. I remember talking to a couple of guys at a Doctor Who convention who said, "Oh yeah, the Macra Terror exists. So and so seen it." And they were talking with such authority that, I just believed them. I believed for ages that the Macra Terror existed. One of them said, yeah, and apparently, and because, of course, you have to be cool. And they didn't go, and it's the best thing ever. They went, yeah, and, you can see the wheels of the car underneath the Macra in some scenes. And it's because the thing was, the Macra is the same size as a car. And so I think they'd conflated that with, it was actually moved around on a car. And I mean, if it was in a studio, it really wouldn't have been so. They were in one way sort of betraying a lack of knowledge, but using it to sort of be boastful, using the few little scant fragments of information that we had about what the Macra Terror actually was to sell a pup to this lad standing next to them in an autograph queue. But that's part of it, Even I was talking about the Omni rumor with somebody last night. That's the stuff that feeds us. Well, I've heard this, and have you heard that? And then you go, but irrespective of whether it's true or not, what episodes? I did this on a Twitter thing. Like, what episodes would you like to come back? And I think I would like an episode of. I'd love it. I'd love it more. But I'd like to see the Macra Terror. I like that the sort of, I like the stuff that's outside the colony and all the sort of the sort of fallen down buildings, and you forget that the sort of location on this, because it's a slight shock, I think, to have all this, the enforced jollity of the holiday camp. That wasn't the story I expected when I saw the shot of the controller and the claw in that 20th anniversary special, and it said underneath, "Humans with a prey in the chilling, the Macra Terror." I haven't seen that for ages, but I know that's what it says. My copy of that is well worn and bust, and in fact I had two, and I cut one up to decorate a file, and then I got given a pristine copy, and then in a move somebody that wasn't me didn't handle it particularly nicely, so it's still in pretty good condition, but it's knackered the spine again a bit. The spines of that 20th anniversary special are not the most robust, and I'm a bit sore about that. But anyway, that's a lengthy introduction to say so I was expecting this dark story of sort of marauding crabs. So then Now, how did I first encounter it? The Target book I know was quite late. I remember being quite disappointed by the Target book. I think partially because it got a not very good review in Doc 2 magazine, which coloured me to it. But it was also one of the first I got the cassette, bootleg soundtrack for, and it was actually one of the ones of better quality, because a lot of them were like you were submerged in bubbling treacle, with a sock over your head. And them being played on some old speakers half a league away. But this one, I had a pretty clear picture of the Macra Terror, and I certainly enjoyed listening to the soundtrack of it. That and Fury from the Deep with and Evil, but they're all the best. Well, Evil and this were better quality, I think. And I like the Orwellian thing of the Big Brother. That's now it's sort of a bit of a cliche in a way, but it's nice for Doctor Who, and it's nice for this setup, because, as I say, I wasn't expecting a story about a holiday camp, and I think when I first found out that the Macra Terror, instead of being maybe some 1950s science base, I liked science bases full of men being tough and sweating, and probably one of them's got wife is expecting a kid at home, so it'll be tough if he dies, and all that. And instead, it's this sort of gay dancing, gay. In fact, this has got the word gay in it, but in the old-fashioned use of the word, of being jolly and cheerful, and that's how that's But of course. So I remember being slightly, is that what this story is? I'm not sure I want it to be that. I want it to be claws smashing through control panels and people getting eaten horribly. But actually, what makes this very special in the end, I think, is the whole idea of surface gloss and enforced cheerfulness, and a society that pretends to be something it isn't, that has evil crabs lurking underneath it, makes it a far greater piece of work, even though it is, you have to see past, that you have to take the spoonful of, sickly sugar in order to appreciate the medicine. And it means we do have this quite gradual build up, but this is not for naught. This is supposed to be, come into my parlour, said the crab to the flying machine travellers. I didn't quite get away with that. And on a side note, I mean, would it be cheeky of me if I chose the scene where the Doctor messes himself up after coming out and looking immaculate? Purely because it's been cut out of the animation, which was hugely controversial, And as somebody that works on the range and knows the producer of the animation, Charles Norton, very well, I would just like to say to all those people who said they thought it was a silly idea to cut the scene, that I agree with you 100%. I also thought it was a really silly... You know your audience. Your audience are purists and like things to be the full story. And I love Charles, and he's a brilliant producer, and he's an intelligent man, and he did a great documentary on Power of the Daleks, and he works really, really hard, and he works above and beyond the call of duty, and these are passion projects that wouldn't have been made without him really pushing stuff through. But I thought he made the wrong call on that, and I told him so. And he didn't help that he then he then I think did a quote where he said, it's only a bit of fluff anyway. Don't say that. So that's another reason to be watching this version, because it is the full version. Love Terence Lodge. He's a terrific actor who plays Medoc, who crops up in Doctor Who a lot. And Ian Fairbairn, who is a lovely, ubiquitous presence through the early years of Doctor Who, and he's in Timeslip as well. I had the pleasure of meeting him once when he came across to me as a slightly eccentric fellow. I think he made his own. He had a jacket that he made himself. I think the jacket that he's wearing in the Invasion DVD documentary is one that he made himself. I think that's my Ian Fairbairn fact. I met him, it was on a day's work doing something, so I didn't really chat to him as much as I should have done. And he was because he was always being interviewed and always doing stuff, I sort of took him a bit for granted, and then was quite surprised when he passed away. Here he is playing Quester, so he's only in episode 1 of this. It's he goes on to be Gregory in the Invasion, and he's Dr. Chester, small part in Seeds of Doom. But Douglas, you sort of normally associate him with Douglas Camfield, who used him quite a lot. He's Brumley, the scientist in Inferno, who gets infected early on. So it's quite a strange. It's not quite the sort of stuff we associate with him, but in fact, he's also one of the voices at the end of the Nigel Neal play The Road that I redid for Radio 4, and actually he'd left his paperwork to a lovely chap called Andrew Mark Thompson, who forwarded that paperwork to me so we could get an insight into what was actually done in the original, and we actually ended up using some of those original voices in the mix for the Radio 4 version, because I got the tape as well from another source. So that was a nice nod to the original, and that was because of Ian Fairbairn doing some uncredited sort of post-production voice work. But Terence Lodge as Medoc, who's got a terrible haircut in this. I think the bowl haircut is one of the. I mean, I can hardly talk. I couldn't have a bowl haircut myself, because it would be a bowl with a massive crack in it, because I don't really have enough to sustain a full crown. But I think the bowl haircut is one of the greatest aberrations. And I don't mean because Patrick Troughton's I don't think of as a bowl haircut, because it's slightly scruffier and he brushes it slightly to the side. The one that is totally brushed down and uniform all the way around, like a Lego man's haircut that you could pull on and off. But I loved Terence Lodge. He's a good. He's not very well at the moment, sadly. And we went to his house for the commentary for this, because I'd interviewed him previously, and I liked Terence very much. And unfortunately, we realised when we got there that he was he told us the same story 2 or 3 times, and we realised he was not as he once was. It's a tragedy, and I've just lost a friend to I lost him a while ago, because dementia takes the conversation before it takes the carriage, as it were. So I met. Anyway, so I met Terence 2 or 3 times, because we met up again when he reunited with Andrew Staines, who's also in Planet of the Spiders with him. Because Terence Lodge is in this. He's in Planet of the Spiders. He's in Carnival of Monsters as Aurum. And he's sort of all of his characters are a bit sort of fussy and beleaguered to different extents and to different dramatic purposes. They're by no means the same performance. Medoc is quite desperate and high octane, Moss in Planet of the Spiders is one of the sort of desperate Spider-Man nervous breakdown people, but it's a different kind of desperation. He's more lost in that. And then Aurum in Carnival of Monsters is a glorious creation, but has his own beleagueredness, but that's more in sort of his position in the pecking order. But he's also in an Age of Kings, where he shows that he's got verse-speaking metal and classical heft, and he's brilliant in the episodes of the Avengers that he's in. I saw one. I'm not an expert in the Avengers, but he's in an early one where he plays a Russian guy who's had some sort of psychological issues, and I remember just thinking, wow, Terence is great in this. So kudos to Terence Lodge. Who also fine servant to Doctor Who, and that's Dennis Goacher as the controller, and this is Anthony Gardner, who's Alvis, who I think was at drama school with Annika Wills. He's still about. I like Ben's stripy shirt, by the way. I quite fancy a shirt like that. I think it's a good look. I do like a stripe. So I haven't talked much about actually the story. Oh no, is that stripy shirt one of the... Ben has a stripy shirt. That's in the Moonbase, maybe. I noticed one of the people in the background has a stripy shirt in this, and so maybe that was what I'd looked at. Doesn't matter. Ben has a stripy shirt in one story that I like. But this whole thing about work, which I sort of believe in. I believe, society only functions if we all sort of try and chip in and do our bit, even, at any level and in any texture. It's not all about labour. I think everybody should be in a road gang, but it's all about, contributing to life and to society that gives us the life and the society that is as, comparatively, lest we forget, more comfortable than anybody at any time. And if you're listening to me in the UK or the US or whatever, more comfortable than most people in the entire world. But this, this looks at the dark side of that. So this sort of, what is the work that they're doing? They're just happily going, we're contributing. Yeah, you're pumping poisonous gas that feeds evil crab beasts, and I like it's and there's definitely an Orwellian 1984 thing going on. And although I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I do like anything that wrestles with those ideas of going, well, what is our civilization? And when we talk about the things that we take for granted, about saying, well, we should be happy, and we should labour, and all of those sorts of things. Go, yeah, well, let's just turn those. Let's just turn the darkness down on those just a little bit, and we'll and see what we actually mean by some of the things that we take for granted. And I think Ian Stewart Black's script it works really well on that. It's a genuine sort of metaphor. And I love the way that the Doctor is in this. I love the way he treats Medoc, who, rightly doesn't trust him and just believe it. And he wins Medoc's trust by talking to him and by acknowledging that, the guy that's talking about the dark underbelly is probably the guy that's correct. But that's another thing as well, isn't it? Is that they all go, oh no, he's mad and he needs treatment and he needs correction, because that's how we deal with dissidents, and that's often how people who are foresighted have been dealt with, as people who don't fit in and as people who rock the boat. And of course the Doctor, my idea of the Doctor is very much that. That's why I love him, I think, is that her, but let's take that for granted, them. But I've got 47 years of calling the Doctor him, so I'm afraid you might have to get used to it and waste your energy being furious about something else. Graham Armitage, by the way, as Barney, was a very busy character actor who was in all sorts of things and had decent film roles and everything, but just must have been free this week because Barney is only in episode 1. So that's a bit of upcasting from director John Davis, who, as I say, has filled this with all sorts of moments that we can't quite imagine what they might have been. He's gone beyond what was in the script, and it's actually very interesting that the script has transformed quite a lot, and yet occasionally they still say they refer to the Macra as insects or whatever because they weren't supposed to be crabs. They were supposed to be. It was at one point I think called Doctor Who and the Spider-Men, wasn't it? So they hadn't quite decided what the Macra were going to be, and then when they finally did decide on that, nobody was quite on top of the script enough to go, should we not change that for crab people? But I actually like that because it means that they don't necessarily know that because the Macra are a lurking presence off screen, we see them and we see the claw, but they don't. So I actually quite like that enigmatic thing, and there's so much attention to detail elsewhere that I'm going to say it's not carelessness. It's a deliberate sort of, well, let's keep this slightly nebulous. Can you be slightly nebulous? I'm sure you can. And I love these sounds of Dudley Simpson in the night. Whatever those funny howls are. It's never quite suggested what those are. Is that the Macra noises? And if it is, they're great because they sound like they sort of could be, but they don't. They're not quite what I would have imagined. So lovely noises there. I'm assuming that's Brian Hodgson's done those. I love Dudley Simpson's music. The sort of organy stuff. There's something really haunting about that, but it's also got that sort of slightly arch futuristic-y thing going on. He's clearly having fun going, oh yeah, we've got these new noises to suggest the future, but there's a tradition of proper ancient organ music also being scary and hallowed, and so it's a nice synthesis of past resonance and future possibilities. Nights are always nice in Doctor Who, night filming. And I like the dynamic between Medoc and the Doctor. The Doctor is brilliant in this. He comes in and he shakes it up, and he's very anarchistic, and that's part of what that scene where he gets a makeover and looks all smart and goes, I don't want that, and gets shaken up, and he does chip in all these little sarky comments about the perfection of the society and the men, he undermines it at every turn like a sort of shabby anarchist, and you can see why they see him as a threat, and that's why he works. That's why he's not just this impish schoolboy pixie. He's he's actually quite a subservient force. He's who's just spotted a crab in the outside in the night sky. I love to see that cliffhanger and see what that was like. There's so much of this story that you can only imagine, and we haven't even mentioned, the credits have just come up, Sandra Bryant as Cheeky, who does not come back in episode 4, but was she even in episode 1? That's something I will try and talk about in episode 4, because there's a possibility, because, well, I'll introduce the thing first. The whole the whole beef with that is that the character of Cheeky is Sandra Bryant in episode 1 and Carol Keyes in episode 4. And Carol Keyes is actually somebody else, but we'll talk about that later. So it's one of those things of the same character in one story being played by two different actresses. And Sandra Bryant had a very decent part. She's in parts 1 and 2 of The War Machines, playing the lady who owns the Inferno nightclub, and it's a good part. So, but apparently, she got another job and asked to be released from this. Now, I presume there's a memo saying that, but I thought there wasn't a production file for Macra Terror, and if there is, I haven't seen one. But anyway, let's talk about that in episode 4. But I'll plant the seed for I'll plant the cheeky seed. What is? It's funny because going into this, I thought I would maybe say, because my memories of this episode are Patrick Troughton being a really pesky fly in the ointment, and the sort of Doctor as anarchist. But actually, I think what I'm drawn to for episode 1, that's what certainly got me talking the most, really, apart from actors' biographies, is I think the thing that put me off it after I'd built up my expectations of what the story should be is the happy and cheerful, the surface, the veneer, but it's a psychedelic veneer, it's a kaleidoscopic veneer, and that, listen to those sounds, I think they're beautiful, and the fact that it's juxtaposed with these sounds and the darkness outside and the underbelly of crabs. Yeah, that was the 60s. Everyone was beautiful and looked nice, but underneath it all, they'd all got crabs. But I'm really drawn to that idea of the writer using metaphor to not only create this world that has that dramatic, pull between, the delightful, cheerful surface and the mystery underneath. That's great. That's a great pull for a script. What is it that's underneath this? But it also speaks to us. So I'm going to say that. I'm going to say the juxtaposition, the choice, the contrast between the surface jollity of the holiday camp and what lies beneath, which is something you could apply to many, many areas in our life and our society. Oh, that's quite highfalutin. It's better than choosing a door. But also I'll do an honourable mention for the shake-up scene, just to annoy Charles, who I'm very, very fond of. And as I say, I do think he's an excellent producer, and without whom we wouldn't have had many of the wonderful things that we've got. What is Michael going to choose for part 1 of the Macra Terror? Here we go.
My favourite thing about episode 1 has to be the refreshing department scene. It's a lovely set piece in which all the regulars are clearly delineated. Chelsea girl Polly getting a spiffy new do, Jack Tar Ben stripped to the waist under ultraviolet dreaming of the med, Highlander Jamie, to whom nothing is more terrifyingly alien than willingly handing yourself over to be emasculated by pretty lasses who might make you look like them. And best of all, the Doctor and the rough and tumble machine. I simply love the fact that there is something called the rough and tumble machine. That alone would justify its place here. But B, this is the best in a series of running jokes about the new Doctor's clothes. In the Highlanders, after shedding one of his numerous disguises, the Doctor finds his own clothes round the back of an inn on a rubbish tip. In the Underwater Menace, the Doctor and Ben need to evade a guard. "We'll walk past him," says the Doctor. "In those trousers," exclaims Ben. And here in the colony, Barney, dear old Barney, when enumerating all the benefits of the refreshing department, delivers his verdict as a throwaway statement of fact. "You, of course, would like your clothes cleaned." It's a genuinely funny line, delivered perfectly by Graham Armitage. Dear old Graham Armitage. Followed by a sequence of physical comedy for Troughton that was probably simply him standing in a box, visible only from the head up, which would be all Troughton needed, and which, in showing the Doctor rejecting the order and uniformity thrust upon him, puts the theme of the story in a nutshell. Perfect.
Oh, there's so much. That was only a minute and 41 seconds long, and Michael said so much. He's very eloquent, is he? You could tell he's a good writer. But I loved that. That's the joy of this. But I know I'm gonna. But am I patting myself on the back? No, because I'm actually patting everybody involved in this who isn't me on the back. The contributors to this podcast who think about this and go to an effort to record. And Michael shot his for the video version very nicely. Got the front cover of Tomb of the Cybermen on his wall. He's a proper fan. Front cover of the Radio Times Tomb of the Cybermen framed on his wall. But what an eloquent summation of that scene that again is sort of, I think in the older days of fandom we'd have gone, well, that's just a bit of padding before you get to the exciting stuff, which is about the monsters tearing people apart with their claws. But as Michael so persuasively and insightfully put it, how that delivered, and I'd forgotten because I was talking so much. I love the fact that Jamie's a bit scared of the women. Oh, I love this TARDIS crew actually. And of course, because Polly's hair is a thing, isn't it? Because it's at different lengths, and I can never remember if she had her hair was originally long, and whether the long hair is the wig or the short hair is the wig, and which way round it goes. But it doesn't matter. Somebody else knows somewhere, and I think I have a different opinion every other day. But it's one of those things, and I do love the picture, the telesnap of Ben with this. I've had ultraviolet treatment for my psoriasis, so I'm well versed in having those funny little goggles on and being stripped down. Nothing changes in 40 years. And as Michael says, that's the real tragedy of this, is that Troughton doesn't need anything to deliver absolute comedy gold effortlessly and perfectly pitched, timed and delivered without even saying anything. That's one of his great and many gifts, and we can't see that. So we are doing a lot of guesswork, not only about the facts, but about the tiny little moments of magic that we'll never be able to create, because only people like Patrick, only actual people in the flesh doing it, only moments where different creative forces combine in a moment of alchemy in a silly, ancient, creaky children's show made in black and white. But there will be stuff in that episode, if it exists anywhere, or there will have been when it did exist in physical form once, some moment of brilliant that would have made us skip with joy, or grin like loons, or go, oh, that's fun, or just go, oh, I'm interested, or just tiny little split seconds lost to the ether. But still, somebody as eloquent and smart as Michael can sum that up, and also choose the rough and tumble machine scene, which I nearly chose to be pesky, to be the second Doctor, to be anarchistic, to slightly, knock one of my employers, one of my superiors, and to slightly speak out of turn about a friend of mine, actually, by going, well, actually, I think that was a bit wrong, which you wouldn't expect me to do, because am I supposed to toe the party line? No, I haven't signed anything that said I have to say I agree with every artistic decision. I can understand why it was made, but I would prefer it if it hadn't been. But I didn't choose that. I didn't choose to be the second Doctor. I chose to do something else, which shows that we still need the Doctor to come in and do the sort of thing that he does. But thanks to Michael. So he's ahead at the moment, and we'll have to carry on watching this in telesnap form, because unfortunately, in terms of moving images, there are no such thing as Macra. See you next time. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke. My special guest is Michael Dennis, who is on Twitter at Michael_Dennis. The patrons of Toby Hadoke's time travels do not exist. There is no such thing as patrons. However, if they did, their names would include Ruben Herfindahl, Robin Bland, Paul Dykes, Andrew East, Andrew Egan, Mark Findlay-Smith, David Gillespie, Charles Gears, Lisa Gledhill, David Green, Robin Groen, Paul J. Guest, Susan Harrison, Steve Hatcher, Duncan Harvey, Ronald Hayden, Stephen Hill, Simon Hodges, Sam Hollingsworth, Matthew Hooliston, Darren Howard, Gregory Hudson, David Hughes, Paul Ingerson, Robert Jewell, Christopher Joyce, Judith Jackson, William Keith, Matthew Kilburn, Andy Kitching, Hendrik Korzeniowski, Andrew Lester and Andrew Llewellyn. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. You too could be added to that list of names. It's one of the perks of being a patron at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. Tiers start from as little as £3 a month. You can get a 10% discount if you sign up for a year, and you get advanced material, bonus features, and other little goodies. If you don't want to do that, and that's perfectly understandable, you can also go to kofi.com/Toby Hadoke and make a one-off donation. And follow me on Twitter at Toby Hadoke, these podcasts at Hadoke Podcasts, and go to my comedy night, Excess Malarkey, in Manchester, 8 p.m. every Tuesday, or on the first Sunday of every month. You can find the comedy night on twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey. It's interesting, I put those little stings close together on my audio assembly, so I had to speak to fit in between the gaps, and I think I was much more concise. Maybe that's what I need, musical stings placed along my conversation so that I know when to wind up and then I don't go off on tangents, which I can do now because it's the after credits bit that an increasing number of people are listening to. It's almost like only the special people will not listen to the after credits. No, there's only about 4 of you. But anyway, it's this. Let's see. I'd get a charity box and see how many times I do the "there are no such thing as Macra" joke / reference during the course of the next 4 episodes. We'll make hundreds for charity. There is no such thing as hundreds for charity. Oh, see, I'm already bored of it.